Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast, the podcast dedicated to simplifying the commercial real estate industry for the masses. Each week, we sit down with industry experts to dissect the many facets of commercial real estate and extract valuable lessons you can apply to your business. Whether you're a new or seasoned business owner or investor, the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast will be your go-to resource for all your commercial real estate needs. Now, here are your hosts, Raphael Collazo and Jeff Walston.
Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast. I'm your host, Raphael Collazo, here with my co-host, Jeff Walston. How's it going, my friend?
Going well. Excited. We're midweek here, and I'm excited about this weather brightening up and coming through here in Kentucky. Also, I wanted to say that business is going really well. I know all the listeners out there, I'm sure that you guys in the commercial realm, it's just seeing like it's springing forward, and I'm hoping that it continues. So what about you, Raphael? How's it going over there, my friend?
Good. Yeah, similar to you. I think what is happening, so now that interest rates are starting to rise, I have a lot of investor clients that are eager to try to find places to put their money in order to, make sure that they can lock in that interest rate, at least for a short period of time, and capitalize on that. So we definitely have been seeing a significant amount of investor activity out there. And, on the other side, the owner-user side, even a lot of optimism as far as the future of this year as it pertains to business. And so a lot of people are still actively looking for property to be able to house their businesses. So I'm similar to you. I'm having a lot of activity on my end, which is great. And it's going to be hopefully great for the community at large. And speaking of just a great conversation and really just an insightful conversation, we actually had the honor of interviewing Karine Blanc. She's the director of investments at the Growth Collective. They do phenomenal work in the Philadelphia area in particular. Essentially what they do is they work with specific developers in order to provide them opportunities, and really they tailor their services and their offerings to those minority developers and underrepresented developers in the area. And so during our conversation, we explored exactly what the Growth Collective was, a little bit of her background as well about how she got into the brokerage space and learned a ton from those experiences. And now she's applying that to what she's doing right now with the Growth Collective. We also talked a little bit about some of the projects that she's currently working on and some of the focus areas that the collective has been taking over the last several years. We also talked about some of the struggles that they faced in order to scale this organization. I know their long-term goals involve, scaling to cities outside of just Philadelphia. They've had a lot of outreach from other parts of the country, where developers are wanting this type of thing within their in their city. And so I know their ultimate goal is to eventually expand outside of where they're at. And, also at the end, we talked a little bit about some of the most impactful books that she's read and her thought process as to why, the work that she does is so impactful, not only to the community at large, but really impactful to those that she serves. So, it was a great conversation. Really enjoyed the discussion. Jeff, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'm just excited to see her growth coming up in the next few years on everything that she's doing. She's an inspiring woman for a lot of ladies in the industry. And like I said, I just can't wait to see her growth. And I think everyone's going to get a lot of value from this one. So, but yeah, that's it.
Definitely. No, I couldn't agree more. And another thing I'd like to say, and I know we say this every episode, but we greatly appreciate you guys' support. We've been seeing a significant uptick in our downloads as a result of you guys leaving 5-star reviews. So if you guys don't mind during this podcast, if you can navigate to Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review and maybe leave us a comment. Let us know what you want to hear next. We love getting feedback from our audience to make sure that we tailor the podcast to be as specific to what you guys are wanting on a day-to-day basis. So we greatly appreciate that. Also, feel free to share an episode with a friend if you think this is going to be of value to them. And I'm telling you, this is a podcast episode that you're going to want to listen to and want to share with others. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into the podcast. Well, hey, Karine, great to see you this fine afternoon.
Hey, how are you?
Doing well. Off the air, we were talking a little bit about the weather, and it seems like in Philadelphia, they had a phenomenal day.
It
was like,
beautiful.
Go ahead.
It was beautiful.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. We had that weather this weekend. So, just trying to take advantage of it while you can. I think now that the weather's starting to turn, people are going to start getting out there more. Obviously people are somewhat over COVID, and hopefully we can get back out there and start, engaging with everyone again. So But first off, we're greatly honored to have you on the podcast. You know, I've done some research on you from your background and everything else, and it's really cool work that you guys are doing in Philly. And you know, we're really excited to dive into the podcast today to learn a little bit more about your story and all the initiatives that you guys are taking in your community, which is very, very important. So to start off, what we usually like to do is we like to learn a little bit more about the person that's across the table from us. So if you don't mind kind of sharing your story and background, I think that'd be awesome.
Sure, yeah, I can share my story. I can start with college. I actually went to college to major in communications, surprisingly, and I wanted to be a writer and also be like a talk show host, and I love that kind of stuff. And then I went to school in September 2008, which was potentially the worst time you could possibly be going to school to major in, whatever, because of the financial crisis and everything that was going on. And as part of a social science requirement, I had to take an economics course, and we were learning about a lot of the things as it related to the financial crisis at that time, and I really fell in love with it. I've always been kind of like a student of human nature and all that, and I just loved how relevant it was, and I changed and I never looked back. When I graduated college, I worked for a lot of different large investment managers. So I did a lot of investment management, portfolio management. In a lot of the portfolios I worked with, there was fixed income, and that's how I started to be exposed to real estate. I ended up working for a large investment manager, a private equity firm in New Jersey, and I really enjoyed it. But it was this big corporate culture, and I was just done with it. I was done with the big corporate life, and especially with real estate. I was working on all these different funds, and I felt like the coolest part about real estate was the actual buildings, like actually like being able to feel the real estate. And you can't really do that when you work for this large firm, especially the large funds. Sometimes you're working on a fund that's like halfway across the world. So anyway, I want to get out of the corporate world, and I wanted to get that on the ground real estate experience. And at the time I was in grad school, I was getting a master's in economics, and I had done a lot of research on urban development and affordable housing, gentrification. I was getting my master's in Newark, New Jersey, and I had just seen the just incredible transformation that had happened over the last 10 years in that city. And upon graduating, I decided to go into brokerage. So I worked as a commercial real estate broker for 5 years, and it was really great. My target market was Newark, and I just got that on the ground experience I was looking for. You learn so much in brokerage. I can't think of another job where I just learned so much about people, deals. I always say brokerage is a very low risk way to learn a lot about real estate. And I enjoyed it. And I worked with a lot of developers at the time, a lot of Black developers. And I just kind of started to see the challenges they were up against. Some of them were inexperienced developers, some of them were experienced developers, and they just had limited resources, limited capacity, limited access to capital. It was just very challenging, especially working in a predominantly Black city like Newark. It didn't make sense. It's like the city is mostly Black, but Black people who want to be on the business side or to build the buildings or own the buildings and the businesses, they were so challenged in that. And it was just really unfortunate. I went through a bunch of stuff in my personal life. I got divorced and I had a young daughter. At that point, it was just like who I was when I went into brokerage was not who I was anymore, and something had to change. And that's kind of where I decided that I would use all this experience and knowledge I had to do good. And that was it. That was my only criteria at that point for work. that I would use everything I knew for good. And shortly after there, I got the opportunity to take to work for the Collective in Philadelphia, and I took it. It was this perfect combination of a lot of different things I've done before, and also my mission and what I wanted to accomplish. And there we are the Collective Investment Group. We capitalize commercial real estate projects built by Black developers in the city of Philadelphia. We have an emphasis on financial returns as well as social impact, which we define in a lot of ways. And it's really been an incredible experience.
That's amazing. No, and I love the way you tied in all the experiences that you had in the past into now what you're doing right now. And I'm sure those skills that you've gained over the period of time have served you extremely well in what you're doing right now as a director of investments at the Collective as well. And interestingly enough, I studied engineering in college, and I took an economics course my freshman year of college. And similar to you, I had that kind of an epiphany moment, and I actually minored in economics, did software development for many years, and then got into the brokerage space, and I've been in it for about 2.5 years now. So it's interesting to see how people's lives impact what they eventually do, and then from there, I guess it's more so just life takes you in so many different directions, and it's kind of interesting to hear about your background. So
yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned your previous experiences at the funds and then getting into the commercial real estate space. One thing I wanted to touch on was your current experience with the Collective. So if you could kind of elaborate a little bit more on exactly what you guys look for in opportunities, and maybe if you could talk a little bit about some of the projects that you guys have worked on recently, just to give us some context about the different things that you guys are doing on the ground in Philadelphia.
Sure. So really, our pipeline, we call them our cohort of 7 inaugural developers. So these are the initial 7 Black developers that our founders pulled together, essentially, who we've been working with to capitalize on their pipelines. So currently in our pipeline, it's mostly development, so ground up, new construction. That's predominantly what our pipeline consists of. We do have a pretty heavy focus on multifamily, mixed use buildings, but we are open to all real estate classes, and we do see a little bit of retail, and some of our developers do some office and different things, but I would say the large majority of it is residential.
Sure. And that's just where the need is currently, or is that just something that you guys have a lot of experience in, so you decided that that's the focal area that you guys are going to focus on?
Yeah, that's a good question. It is a little bit of both. A lot of our developers do have the residential experience, and that's where the multifamily experience is. But I also think it's a reflection of the demand in Philadelphia. There's a big demand for housing here, especially affordable housing, whether, we do a lot of market rate housing too, but there just is, I think that pipeline is reflective of how big the demand is here.
For sure. No. And I actually, it's a very in-depth process, especially the affordable housing credits and everything. I spoke with a attorney pertaining to, the different things you have to do in order to qualify for some of the credits. And it's a pretty in-depth process. And, there's always a limited amount, at least in Kentucky, there's a limited amount of capital allocated for, one of the requirements, which is like, it has to be a certain amount of the project that has to be funded by state bonds in order for you to qualify for some of these tax credits. And so, I'd imagine that you guys also help as far as the resources are concerned to be able to put them in contact with the appropriate parties to make sure that they're able to qualify for some of these credits. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it's such a complicated process, and some of our developers really specialize in doing what we call naturally occurring affordable housing. So not necessarily the kind of affordable housing that might fit the criteria for some of the subsidies and those kinds of things. But we really believe that this naturally occurring affordable housing is really good for the community. And that's also like around how we define impact. We try to define it in a way that's broader to really bring the kind of change we want to see in the neighborhoods, because a lot of these programs and subsidies, they just get diluted to checking a bunch of boxes, and then you end up asking, like, did that actually accomplish what you set out to do in the community, or did the developer just collect a developer's fee and you just checked a box, you put a building in a neighborhood to never return to that neighborhood again? So those are the kind of initiatives that the collective takes on to challenge the traditional ways of bringing change to community.
It's amazing. No, really. And I like the idea of the reference that you made towards some of these programs, because like you said, a lot of times it does feel like it is checking a box. And not only that, but a lot of these programs, they kind of give credence or more weight to people who have already the experience. And so it's very hard for people to be able to kind of jump into the realm without the requisite experience to be able to take on some of these projects. So I think
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say even to excuse me, even to be able to understand the criteria of these programs, sometimes you need to spend so much on an attorney. So when we're talking about Black developers who historically have been undercapitalized, both in terms of the money to put in deals, but also their own businesses, it's a lot of upfront expenses, with sometimes little change in the communities that they really want to change.
definitely. No, for sure. So I was kind of wondering if you could maybe touch on maybe one of the projects that you guys have been working on to provide a little bit of context of, the different steps along the process to be able to get one of these initiatives, completed.
Sure, I can kind of walk you through what our process is, and how we kind of evaluate deals. So it
Mhm.
typically starts off with our investment team having an initial conversation with a potential developer. Each of our developers have their own pipeline, and maybe they bring a specific project to us that needs funding, or maybe there's a specific project that speaks to the kind of impact that we're looking for, and we'll kind of just make sure that there is some mutual fit in terms of the sponsor as well as the specific project, in terms of the kind of impact we're looking for. And then we'll kind of debrief and look into their model, and kind of take it to the next level to say, okay, this is something that we would like to do a deeper dive into. And then at that point, we start the process of due diligence. Simultaneously, we might reach out to our capital sources that we're working with, to see if this is a project that they would be interested in. At this point, we've developed a lot of relationships with different capital sources, so we have a pretty good network, with a good feel for what they're looking for. And with that, we'll kind of put the project through that lens, like, okay, well, this might be a good fit for these three capital sources, and then we'll package it in a way that they can really evaluate it. And then at that point, we try to work out a deal with both the capital source and the sponsor.
Sounds no, for sure. No, so and one of the things that I find interesting about what you guys do as well is that do you typically work with individuals who have experience maybe on the residential front, or is this also someone who maybe has aspirations to get into development, and they decide, hey, I want to approach the collective to see if maybe there's an opportunity for me to be able to take on a project or whatever else? So I'm kind of interested to see what the vetting process is for developers that you work with.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. We get that one a lot, and it's important. And we really work with experienced developers. Our developers, they're not new developers, but they are developers who may lack capacity in a certain way, and
Mhm.
that's where we really add value to them. We're almost like an additional team for them. So a lot of our developers, they're limited to doing one project at a time just because of the way that they're resourced and the way that they're staffed. And we really want to be a resource where they can now take multiple projects at one time and help them grow and scale. So we like experienced developers, developers who have already completed several ground up new construction projects. And then we really just want to help them get to the next level.
That's awesome. Really. So one of the things I was curious about is, since inception, because again, the idea of the collective came into being, and now you guys start hitting the ground running. What are some of the struggles that you faced as you've gone through the process of trying to enact this change within the community?
Yeah. It's, I feel like we could do a whole episode on challenges just because you just run into things that you just never saw coming, and one thing I can speak to definitely is we are essentially going down two different lanes in terms of how the kind of deals that we're doing. So on one end, we are in the process of raising a fund to be able to deploy that capital. And then separately, we're also seeking to capitalize deals outside the fund. And I think it comes down to like fundraising is really hard to do. And I feel like I talk to so many people who say that, and it just investors really look at a fund through such strict criteria that you have to be so buttoned up, and it's a good thing, it really is. But I would say that is like the biggest process, the biggest challenge in our process.
Oh, for sure. No, and similar to what you were saying, I've spoken with several people who have tried to institute the fund model in their business, and the biggest thing is that you don't really necessarily have a project that people can look at and touch and feel. It's just here's what we want to do. So please give us your money, or at least allocate the money towards this fund. And it may be because it may be spoken for a while, and if you can't deploy it into other assets or another opportunity, some people are like, well, I could, instead of me allocating towards this, then I can go deploy it somewhere else. So is that kind of what you're referencing?
Yeah, and well, one good thing about the position we're in, which is an advantage of working with us and the collective, is that we actually have a pipeline. Usually when you're launching a fund or a new initiative like this, the one thing that's missing is the pipeline, where we have the pipeline, and that's almost the advantage to working with us, where we have access to our developers' pipelines, well over 30 projects that we're going through. But even the track record, overcoming those kinds of questions, and some investors have very strict criteria for those things. It's literally like going down the checklist and just making sure everything is like almost cookie cutter the way they want it. But it's also, every capital source has different ways of doing deals. Not every investor is a fund investor, and you have to accept that. While we think the best way to bring to deploy the capital the way we want to deploy it is through a fund. We think that would be the most efficient way to do it, and that would be the most efficient way to bring the change we want. We don't want to leave money on the table when we could still capitalize deals outside the fund with an investor who's just not a fund investor. We still want to work with those kinds of parties.
Oh, for sure. No, and I think that's some, intriguing insights that you shared pertaining to those two models of investing in real estate. So one of the things I'm curious about is, you guys are currently, you guys have made some pretty good progress over the last several years as you guys have built up this business. Where do you see yourself in the next, 5 to 10 years as an organization? What are your goals? Is it to expand outside of Philadelphia, or can you kind of elaborate a little bit on that? I think that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, you raise a good point. So right now we really are focused on Black developers in Philadelphia. But since we've launched our initiative, we've gotten so much interest from other cities. And I definitely think that's on our radar, that a lot of other cities are calling us and saying, hey, we have Black developers here, and we really need an organization to kind of pull them together and be this vehicle for capital, where that has never existed existed before. And one thing that I kind of saw in my work in Newark is that what happens very often is that even if there's a city or some kind of program that is well intentioned and they develop some kind of program for Black developers, what happens in a lot of cities is that there's one Black developer that ends up doing like a decent sized deal or a big deal, or ends up getting press, or something like that, and then all of a sudden all the money flows to that one developer, because people coming in that city will say like, oh, well, we want to go with the person who we already, we read the news release on this person, and we already heard his name, and this person must be vetted because, they already got this money. So we're just going to keep going to that person, and it really, the collective really addresses that issue, because it's like, no, now we have a pool of 7 developers, and there's so many more Black commercial real estate developers in Philadelphia, but it's like, now you come to us and we could show you a lot, and you don't have to cherry pick Black developers, which is what happens in a lot of other cities. So definitely in that expansion, it'll really address that issue that exists all over the country.
That's awesome. Yeah, no. And like you mentioned with the collective, you vet these individuals on the front end, and then you get access to their pipeline as well. So if a unique opportunity is presented to you by, someone who maybe doesn't have nearly the experience of someone else, but they do have the experience because they've been vetted through the organization, you can give them the opportunity to be able to execute that business plan. Whereas in another situation, maybe in Newark or some other parts of the country where these initiatives are more siloed, those type of problems occur. So I think that's awesome. And I think, like you said, I think it is definitely needed across the country. And hopefully over the next 5 to 10 years, you guys do take steps towards, expanding your reach just outside of Philadelphia. Cause I know, like I said, I think it is a very impactful thing you guys are doing in the city. So
yeah, definitely.
Definitely. So, for those individuals who maybe don't have that experience as of yet, they're maybe not, in a situation currently that, is available, I guess, for the collective, right? So maybe they just don't have the requisite experience to be able to pursue, an opportunity with you guys currently. What are some of the best resources that you recommend to people to be able to learn more about the development space, and then also resources that they can access outside of what you guys currently offer that could help them get to the point where they can actually, come to you guys and be part of the group?
Sure. So one thing I've seen, which is starting to exist in Philadelphia, and I've also seen it in a lot of other urban markets, is an ability for developers, especially new developers, to buy lots from their city. And it can be quite a tedious and long process. Of acquiring land from a city, but it is an opportunity for someone who's a new developer to buy land at a very low basis. And I find that a lot of people who are looking to get into development, that's usually where they start, rather than buying, paying market rate for land, or, which is like very hard to find in a lot of places now, or very expensive. The fact that a lot of these cities are just sitting on these vacant lots, they're usually able to release them at a lower basis than you would pay on the market. And I've really seen some developers do quite well. Even they were able to just jump from, maybe doing like a 3-family to 10 units, 20 units, and really kind of scale their business that way. It definitely takes some patience. I'm not gonna downplay that at all, but I've seen people be very successful that way.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I know a lot of developers here locally in Louisville, Kentucky, and one in particular that I know, he does a lot of that. It's with a land bank where they go and they buy these lots for a very low basis, like you said, and they develop them, and they create a brand new residential property. Typically, that's kind of what he does a lot of. So, but you're right. I mean, it can be quite lucrative, and it is needed, because a lot of these, where the land is located, a lot of times it is in areas that are blighted or affected by, outside forces. And so being able to go in there and develop the property and bring up the tax basis around it can also be a benefit to the community as well. So
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
definitely. So first off, we greatly appreciate your time today. I mean, it's been interesting to hear, your background and your perspective and some of the initiatives you guys are taking in the Philadelphia area. What we usually do near the end of the episode is to ask our guests to share one of the most impactful books they've ever read. Our audiences are pretty voracious readers. I love reading. I'm a big I love to read books. And so I wanted to kind of ask you what's one of the most impactful books you've ever read. It doesn't have to be real estate related. It can be really anything.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I read a lot. I would hands down The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. That book, it changed my life. I'm very big on meditation, and I actually am a meditation teacher. And it's one of those things, there's like this statistic out there that says the average person spends 50% of their day thinking about something other than what they're doing right now. And it just really makes you question how efficient we are in our work, in every part of our life. And I think being present is a big part of my efficiency in life in general and in business. And so hands down, The Power of Now. If you haven't read it, go read it.
Yeah, no, I'll add that to my list. But you're right. I mean, and this is something that I struggle with, and I'm sure a lot of people struggle with that are listening to this as well, is that it's so easy to get distracted nowadays with our phones or, notifications that are coming via email, et cetera. And so, similar to you, I try to meditate in the mornings. I work out in the mornings as well, which helps clear my mind a little bit as well. And it's helped me a lot when it comes to remaining focused throughout the day. But, just removing the distractions as best as possible in and of itself will help you not only in your personal life, but not only your professional life, but I'm in your personal life as well. So that's amazing. So Karine, we greatly appreciate your time. As I said before, one thing we like to ask at the end of the episode is if our guests would contribute something to what we call the Commercial Real Estate Treasure Chest. It's a repository of resources that we make available to our audience. And it could be, a helpful PDF, an Excel sheet. We've had people contribute ebooks that they've written in the past as well. So wanted to give you an opportunity to ask, what are you willing to contribute today?
Sure. I'm not really sure. We do have some marketing materials that I think would be helpful. But yeah, I'll have to think about it a little bit, but I'll dig something up.
For sure. No, it'll be a mystery item. So if you guys are listening to this, it'll be a great mystery item that you guys need to take advantage of. So, well, again, we greatly appreciate your time as always. Like I said, if you guys are listening to this in a podcast format, please leave us a 5-star review. We've seen a significant uptick in our downloads as a result of you guys engaging with the podcast. So we would greatly appreciate if you could leave a 5-star review. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm and ensures more and more people can hear this message. So thank you again all for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.